Hi everyone, so today my group will present a case study about the Willowbrook State School experiment. This case study is all about Dr. Saul Krugman was a scientist in 19th century. He do a vaccine about hepatitis. In 1950, Dr. Saul Krugman sought funding from the board to conduct his experiment. He proposed to use Willowbrook School as a site for his experiment. In 1947, Willowbrook ran an institute for mentally handicapped children. The institute houses 4,000 children and adults with severe intellectual and mental disabilities. The institution was in a bad condition and not managed well. They also give unsanitary conditions for the children to live in. Due to this condition, Willowbrook Institution had an outbreak of hepatitis disease. Dr. Krugman saw this an opportunity for him to conduct the experiment for his global gamma globulin injection to protect the kids against the hepatitis. He conducted two types of experiment, which first involved the children already within the facility. They were injected with the antibodies that were believed to protect them against hepatitis. This group is called experiment group, while others in the control group were not injected with the antibodies yet. The second type of experiment was conducted on the children who were newly admitted to the Willowbrook institution. These children were given the antibodies, then some were intentionally infected with hepatitis by giving them the milkshake prepared by the nurses. The milkshake was prepared by taking the fecal matters of the infected children and then blend it with the milkshake. All the parents have no choice but to allow their children to be experimented by Dr. Krugman if they want their children be placed on the institution. And on that year, a lot of journalists and reporters come to the institution to see the latter situation on the Willowbrook institution, and one of them is Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo Rivera then released a journal about the Willowbrook State School, and on that year, on 1972, the case, the Willowbrook State School became a huge case. Also, with the Dr. Krugman experiment, was become a huge case on 1972 until this case is bringing to the court of the New York, and in 1987, Willowbrook Institution was ordered to close immediately. This is all the fact deliberation that we get from our case study. First, in 1950, Dr. Saul Krugman sought funding from the board to conduct his experiment about the hepatitis vaccine. In 1947, Willowbrook ran an institute for mentally handicapped children. The institution was too crowded and it was chronically understaffed. They also give unsanitary conditions for the children to live in. Due to this condition, Willowbrook Institution had an outbreak of hepatitis disease. Dr. Krugman saw this an opportunity for him to conduct the experiment for his gamma globulin injection to protect the children against hepatitis. He conducted two types of experiment, which first involved the children already within the facility. They were injected with the antibodies that were believed to protect them against the hepatitis disease. This group is called the experiment group, while the control group was not injected with the antibodies. These children were given the antibodies, then some were intentionally infected with hepatitis by giving them the milkshake prepared by the nurses. The milkshake was prepared by taking the fecal matter of children infected with hepatitis and then blending it into the milkshake. Parents of severe children with disabilities who had no other option for their care were forced to consent to their child being experimented on to gain admission to Willowbrook. In 1972, reporter Geraldo Rivera snuck into Willowbrook and filmed the condition he saw. Then, he released a journal about the Willowbrook State School. The parents are moved forward by bringing this case to the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of New York. In 1987, the Willowbrook State School was finally closed.
The Willowbrook State School experiment was a case focused on an individual named Saul Krugman who was a doctor doing his research and data analysis on hepatitis disease. So here is his good personality. Dr. Saul Krugman is a determined person as he concentrated on completing his data research and producing a vaccine for the hepatitis disease suitable with its time. He is also meticulous in conducting the experiment because he separated the children into two groups to obtain two results at the end. Despite the good qualities he has as a doctor, Dr. Selkirkman is a malice person because he does not mind harming the handicapped kids at Willowbrook School and even uses it to his advantages. He is also scornful because he disrespects the children with severe intellectual disabilities by claiming that it must be exhausting for the parents to raise them, so he thinks that he is doing a favor for the parents. Not only that, he is also a cloud chaser. Dr. Sokokman just wants the fame and title of the leading doctor in hepatitis research after succeeding the experiment. He is also a very selfish person. According to Dr. Krugman, sacrifices are necessary to make his experiments a success, even if it causes multiple deaths. His dishonesty is also shown when he does not own up to his cruel experiments that caused 700 deaths at the Willowbrook school and continued to prosper as someone who had succeeded to produce a vaccine for the hepatitis outbreak.
Hello, my name is Nur Aisha binti Zarilal and my metric number is 2161X0. Now I am going to explain and state the value deliberation, and the first element is identification of the moral problems. One of the moral problems is the parents' consent. Parents of severe children with disabilities who had no other option for their care were forced to consent to their child being experimented on to gain admission to Willowbrook. They were not allowed to choose their children's fate. Another choice of the main problem is the children's right that was being experimented. In order to get the hepatitis vaccination, Dr. Krugman thinks that he must complete his research to save and cure more people without care about the children. The children are unable to stand their own rights. Next, move on to the second element, which is choice of the main problem. The main problem is when Dr. Krugman conducts his experiment about the gamma globulin injections toward the children at the Willowbrook institutions to protect them from hepatitis without permission and knowledge from the parents and the patient themselves. Many of them suffered from the experiment until it led to continuous hepatitis infections, and it became worse when many children died during the experiment was run. Dr. Krugman also made a mistake by asking the nurse to make a milkshake from the fecal matter of children infected with hepatitis and then blending it into a milkshake. Then children who drink the milkshake will get infected. He did this because he wanted to test the level of antibodies injected into the child that he had produced. The project was conducted illegally without permission. Dr. Krugman must emphasize the right of the parents and children for making decisions about their own lives, whether they want the injections for protection from hepatitis or not. Next, move on to the third element, which is the values at stake. The right of parents to make their own decisions for their children must be followed. In the Willowbrook institution, parents who want to place their children there must allow their children to get hepatitis injections from Dr. Krugman without knowledge and agreement, which is against bioethics. Another value at stake is the cleanliness of Willowbrook institution. The institution was too crowded and it was chronically understaffed. As a result of neglecting the background, physical, mental, and sexual abuse was rampant in the institution. They also give unsanitary conditions for the children to live in. Due to this condition, Willowbrook Institution had an outbreak of hepatitis disease.
Okay, so for duty deliberation, we are going to reflect on the most challenging cases, in which the most challenging case was when ethical issues were involved, in which the doctor, so Krugman, was conducting a harmful experiment on the handicapped children at Willowbrook State School. His action as a doctor was very unethical because he used these children in order to achieve the fame and title as the first scientist to ever discover the difference between infectious hepatitis A and serum hepatitis B. As a doctor, he should not endanger other humans' lives by experimenting on them, even if there is a high percentage of it being a success. According to the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights, Article 4, in applying and advancing scientific knowledge, medical practice, and associated technologies, direct and indirect benefits to patients, research participants, and other affected individuals should be maximized, and any possible harm to such individuals should be minimized. However, Dr. Solomon did not mind harming those handicapped children because he believed that sacrifices were inevitable. This case even resulted in 700 deaths of disabled children. In other cases, the nurses also joined hands with the doctor by producing the milkshake from infected tools. These children were given the antibodies, while some of them were intentionally infected with hepatitis by giving them the milkshake. The nurses themselves should know their responsibility and their role as the medical assistants, in which they are to cure the patients. They should have realized the unethical issues underlying when conducting the experiment conducted by the doctors or Krugman, because it is harmful to the children. Hence, if nurses encounter orders from the doctor that they feel are unsafe, they should first consult with the charge nurse or bring it to the supervisor or manager's attention is also commendable and mandatory to avoid cause of harm to the patients. Other than that, since the children who are developmentally disabled lack decision-making capacity, the parents must then opt to provide informed consent or refusal of the medical treatment. So the parents must consider the benefits and risks that come along with the experiment, and if their child is harmed during a medical procedure, the parent can claim for medical malpractice. Or if the parents feel threatened by the nurses or the doctors, they can sue them.
First thing first, there was no justice for the children in the mental institute, where they were mistreated very badly by the authority and did not get equal treatment as the ones who were normal. They even had to drink milkshake out of fecal mix with hepatitis virus, and the institute itself was in a bad condition and unhygienic for the children to live. This action goes against the principle of justice, where it's related to Article 10 that values equality, justice, and equity, where it states the fundamental equality of all human beings in dignity and rights is to be respected so that they are treated justly and equitably. Next, experimentation on children, even with parental informed consent, is illegal unless it is in the interest of the child. Dr. Krugman and the people involved in the experiment performed the experiment on the mentally disabled children, and the intention of the experiment was never the immunization or the well-being of the children, since the higher-ups did not even care about the children's safety and well-being. We can clearly see that this is non-comply with the principle of beneficence, where it's related to Article 4 of Benefit and Harm, that states in applying and advancing scientific knowledge, medical practice, and associated technologies, direct and indirect benefits of patients, research participants, and other affected individuals should be maximized, and any possible harm to such individuals should be minimized. Dr. Sol Krugman defies the principle of autonomy, where he used mentally disabled children who could not advocate for themselves nor had an understanding of the experiments conducted on them. The principle underlies the requirement to seek the consent or informed agreement of the patient before any investigation or treatment takes place. Hence, it's correlated with Article 7, where persons without the capacity to consent. It states that research should only be carried out for his or her direct health benefit, subject to authorization and the protective conditions prescribed by law, and if there is no research alternative of comparable effectiveness with the research participants able to consent. Research which does not have potential direct health benefit should only be undertaken by way of exception with the utmost restraint, exposing the person only to a minimal risk and minimal burden. And if the research is expected to contribute to the health benefit of other persons in the same category, subject to the conditions prescribed by law and compatible with the protection of the individual's human rights, refusal of such persons to take part in research should be respected. Dr. Sol Krugman did not have any respect for the children, and he used his power to conduct the experiments on them where they can't even decide to be in it or not. Last but not least, the principle of non-maleficence holds that there is an obligation not to inflict harm on others, where in this case, Dr. Krugman sacrificed around 700 students to be assigned as experimental subjects, where some students were intentionally infected with hepatitis in order to observe the effectiveness of the antibody. This defies the principle of non-maleficence, and it is related to Article 4, which is benefit and harm, where in applying and advancing medical practice, direct and indirect benefits of patients, research participants, and other affected individuals should be maximized, and any possible harm to such individuals should be minimized. We can see by Dr. Krugman's action that he ignores the Article 4 completely.
Hello, my name is Nur Azhar Farisha binti Muhammad Azam and my matrix number is 216066 and I would like to talk about testing consistency for our case study, which is the hepatitis experiment began in 1942 with the outbreak of the disease among US soldiers and military personnel, which was researcher eventually determined caused by a contaminated batch of yellow fever vaccine. Launched under the aegis of the war effort, the studies end only in 1972 when public and professional sentiment towards experiment or vulnerable population shift. In 1967, Friedrich Jenhardt, working at the Presbyterian Luke's Hospital in Chicago, reported that a human hepatitis virus could be passed in marmoset monkeys, and then the affected animal developed evidence of liver disease. In 1941, Hans Werk infected psychiatric patient from the mental hospital in Breslau, and in 1944, Arnold Dohrmann carried out experiment on Jewish children in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. The last one is further investigation into the hepatitis research, which was carried out by the German scientists during the Second World War, especially with groups. Alright. From this case, the family need to be adequately informed about the potential risks and practice associated with the treatment in terms of its purpose, methods, or extent of the experiment, and details regarding any possible positive or negative effect to the patients. The doctor should not violate his duty just to protect his patient, subject to liability if he withhold any factor necessary to form the basis of intelligent consent by the patient to the proposed treatment. Patients with parents who are unable to give consent need public involvement in health, social policy, practice, and researchers in all stages of the research process. In emergency situations, public opinion whether the rules and regulations permitting research of this kind are in accordance with the views of those may be the most affected. The head of the researcher must be responsible for making a clear agreement that he will conduct the experiment by exposing the person only to minimal risk and minimal burden. The last one is the informed consent document must exclude any technical terms and be plainly written in language that our 8th grade student could be easily understand.
To sum up everything, this case is like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. In other words, good will or goals are not at fault. However, it turns bad in a blink of an eye when humans themselves choose to make them a reality in a wrong way that could anguish innocent people. Good intentions don't matter when people's lives are at stake for the sake of experimental purposes. The lesson learned through this case is that, as a doctor, we must prioritize the lives of human beings and not inflict harm on them by turning them into an experiment as we like. We must also be honest in carrying our duty. We should be knowledgeable so that we can define our rights. In this case, parents should play an important role in defending their rights of children so that they are not easily used by irresponsible parties. The nurses should know their responsibility as a medical assistant by curing the patients.